Hello you guys, today I wanted to do a quick video about what to do if you think you have PCOS or endometriosis, or you've just been diagnosed with both. First of all, I think the biggest piece of advice I can give you prior to getting diagnosed or during the process of getting diagnosed is to put your foot down. The only reason I got diagnosed so quickly with PCOS was because 1, it was genetic, 2, we went for x-rays straight away and they could see my cysts there, and it was undeniable from that point really. But if we didn't put our foot down, I was 14 at the time, so technically my mum was doing that, it probably wouldn't have come through so quickly. And also my endometriosis diagnosis was 4 years later, to be exact, and that only came through because, again, we put our foot down. I was getting hospitalized from the pain that I was in, and we said there is something more wrong here, and then they were like, the only possibility is you also have endometriosis. It's really hard to do that sometimes with medical professionals, but my advice is to not be afraid to do it, because don't ask, tell. That's my first big piece of advice. Don't ask, tell. It is your body, your ovaries. If you want kids, that is at risk. So don't ask, tell. Say, I'm getting a diagnosis of whatever it is. You are doing x-rays, like not x-rays, belly scan. You're doing scans. We are doing this now, within this month. We are having appointments, we are discussing what is going on, and we are talking about next steps. Put that foot down. I don't care how you do it, just do it. So then, one thing to know if you are newly diagnosed or wondering if you have it is there is no cure. Nothing is really going to get rid of it. There are things that can help, but it kind of does its own thing, unfortunately. For me, I went unmedicated for 4 years until I was getting hospitalized, and then from that point forward to now, which has almost been 3 years, I have been on the pill as medication, and the pill that I was on at first worked for 2 years and then started to give me migraines, and so I had to come off to prevent a stroke. And then the one I'm on now works great. So although it stops the period and it stops the irregularity and it stops the pain, you're still going to deal with other things from these chronic illnesses. You're going to deal with the mood swings. You're going to deal with still the monthly emotions of a period, even if the period isn't there. Side effects of whatever pill you take. With the first pill that I took, I was severely depressed for the first 3 months, and then after that, to the point where I got put in therapy. And I'm still in therapy, but after that stopped. The longest lasting effect was I couldn't eat fish anymore. Like the smell made me gag. I physically couldn't eat it at all when I usually love fish. Now that I've been off of that for almost a year, I'm slowly going back into eating fish, but yeah, it changed my appetite, it changed my taste buds, it changed a lot of things. So don't expect there to be some sort of cure or help or anything. Just, unfortunately, there's very little for us out there. So it sucks, but it's reality, and there are stuff in the works at the moment. There are trials going on for cures for it, so that's great. They started this year. So there will be something one day. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping big time. But for now, there's only things that only slightly help, and you're still going to deal with a good chunk of what these conditions cause. For example, I still deal with chronic exhaustion 25/8. So the next piece of advice I would have is understand what your body is telling you and what it needs. This is general advice, yes, but especially if you have endo or PCOS, your body is telling you most of the time what you need. That you're low on sugar, if you're craving sugar, that you're dehydrated, that you need more sleep. And it's hard, I do understand it's hard, because you will have chronic exhaustion even if you sleep enough, but you will be able to tell when you've slept enough versus when you haven't, and the difference in that exhaustion. So just observe yourself, basically. Observe yourself and your body and your emotions and what you're needing. That is most important, and it's gonna take time. I think it took me 4 years to really understand what my body was needing from me. It was needing medication, first of all, but it also needed routine, good sleep, good food, like constant food. You know, that there's a difference between PCOS and endo, and there's also a difference between PCO and PCOS. And I say PCOS for both because, well, for me, I have half the syndrome. I don't have the whole syndrome, but I have half the syndrome. So yeah, just get to know your body, get to know what it needs, what it wants, and it will take time. Don't beat yourself up for not understanding straight away or yet, but just keep like an eye on what it needs and then give it what it needs. My next piece of advice is, when following accounts on social media to do specifically with PCOS or endometriosis, not to take everything as gospel. So I follow a very big PCOS account. It's ran by an Australian guy. I think his wife has PCOS, which is why he started it. I'm not sure, but I think. And they sell supplements and everything. Anyways, they post like 5 times a day, and I always see things about insulin and diets, and not all the time, but just like that is a good chunk of their content. And I get it, because people with PCOS, usually if you have the syndrome or this part of the syndrome, you gain weight, and it feels like there's no way of like stopping that or like preventing it or balancing it. Obviously for me, I don't have that part of the syndrome. The parts of the syndrome that I have is the hair growth, and there's a bunch of other things on the list of what's on the syndrome, but I don't have that one part of the syndrome. So for me, I know not to read into those posts. I know that those posts aren't for me, and I also would talk to a doctor as well as looking at posts, and not just one or the other. And I'd also be really careful with diets. Like people with PCOS just need healthy food, and like a good amount of healthy food, like a big chunk of healthy food, regardless of what part of the syndrome you have and don't have. For our hormones, not our bodies or our weight, it's literally just for our hormones. That's why. So I'm very meh about all the dietary posts and stuff, and like, oh, insulin and sugar, and the truth is like, without sugar I die. Like, I need a certain amount of sugar or I don't feel awake, and that is part of PCOS as well. So it's finding balance in your diet, essentially. It's just having what you need and then not too much of anything. So I would just say, be careful with your intake of information. don't just trust everything straight away, and understand what parts of the syndrome, if you have the syndrome, that you have and don't have, because you'll know what pertains to you and what doesn't. My final piece of advice for people with PCOS / endo, one or the other, is understand how common it is. It is so common, and most people don't know they have it. But considering we have statistics of people who do know, and it's like 1 in 5 women around the world, it's a lot of people who have it. It's very common. So don't get yourself down about it. It's manageable, which when I was 18, like when I just turned 18, I genuinely thought I was going to die from it. Like, I thought that was it. And my mum did almost die from it before having me. But saying that, she then had me and my sister without IVF, and there are so many like good positive stories that come from people who have PCOS and endo, and it's important to listen to those as well as the ones that are educational but less positive. So just be aware that there are so many people who deal with it. So many people. A good chunk of my friends deal with it. So just find people that relate to you if you can. And even if you don't want to do that, just understanding that you're not alone really helps, because there have been a lot of times since my diagnosis is that I've felt extremely alone and isolated, and like my illnesses are personal, which they're not. So understand that they are chronic illnesses, and there's not enough information out there about them. There's not enough awareness. There's not enough help. But with what we do have, it is still manageable, considering mine is extremely awful and I'm managing. And hopefully one day there will be something that can help people actually just not have it anymore and things like that. And I will also say, ending this on a positive note, prior to coming off my last pill, I went for a checkup scan and they said that my cysts had gone down. So I know that I still have it, because when I came off of it about 4 months after coming off and not having any medication, it got drastically awful again. So I will say, like, the medication is quite literally saving my life. But that ability to not have cysts or like them to grow smaller, those small tiny things are so important and such achievements, and should be celebrated when they happen. And it's a relief, and you can get to that point too. It sounds like, the way I know I'm putting it sounds easy, but it's not. Please remember that this is 7 years after my initial PCOS diagnosis, and 3 years after my endometriosis diagnosis, and 3 years after medication, and 1 year only after almost having a stroke from my first medication. There is a lot of shit that goes into it, and at the same time I don't want to scare you, because it's not fun and it's not easy, but it is still possible to have a positive outlook on it and mindset and experiences. So yeah, I think that's my top 5 pieces of advice. I have a lot more. There's so many things I could go into, so if you enjoy this, let me know, and if you want that advice, I will happily give it to you. But in the meantime, I do have a few posts about it on my Instagram, so you can check those out if you want to. But if you do suffer from PCOS or endo, just know that I know exactly what you're going through, and it's not easy, but you are still here and you're still strong, and it's gonna be okay, even if it takes a while. I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you in my next one. Mwah.